Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, it is a novel experience for those of us on this side of the chamber that for the first time in 14 years we are not in government in Westminster and therefore not having to defend a budget which is on its way, which will bring an interesting new slant to my remarks, Presiding Officer. And to borrow a line we've heard from the other side of the chamber several times, I can say with all integrity that Scotland is being failed by both of its governments, the one in Holyrood and the one in Westminster, because we've had a dismal start already from the new Labour government, and not surprising to see the ratings of the Prime Minister already in freefall. Let's look, if we can, first of all, at the Labour Party in government and what is going to come from its budget before I turn to the Scottish National Party. The economic legacy inherited by the Labour government is far better than they would suggest, despite the headwinds that all Western governments have faced ever since the financial crash of 2008-2009, a financial crash, of course, under the watch of a Labour Chancellor and a Labour government at that time. Despite that, the UK economy has performed well in relation to many competitor economies. UK GDP grew faster than any other European country in the G7 in that period, and faster than the EU as a whole in that same period. And we avoided the depth of recession, for example, seen in Germany. In that same period, we saw 4 million new jobs created and record levels of employment, and inflation returning very close to the Bank of England target of 2%. So the economic legacy inherited by the Labour government was a strong one in relative terms, as indeed was the financial legacy. According to the Office of Budget Responsibility, the deficit Labour inherited is 4.5%. Now, Mr Johnson is shaking his head at that. Let me remind him that the financial deficit Labour left when they left office in 2010 was 10.3%. Nearly more than double what the Conservatives left Labour when they came in. But if the Deputy First Minister wants to intervene to defend the Labour government, I'll give way to her instead.
Deputy First Minister.
If the member could confirm the deficit of the Scottish Government, which by law is required to balance its budget every year.
Fraser.
I think the Deputy First Minister will be very familiar with her own GERS figures that set out the nominal deficit of the Scottish Government, where would you become an independent country, double the rate of the UK as a whole. Of course I'll give another.
Deputy First Minister.
I didn't think the member needed a lesson in the difference between the Scottish Government's budget and projected figures, but can he confirm whether the Scottish Government has balanced its budget every year for the last 17 years?
Fraser.
Well, what the Deputy First Minister is tempting me to do, Presiding Officer, is congratulate the Scottish Government for not breaking the law. Not breaking the law. Because the law says you have to balance their budget. If that is the height of ambition of the Deputy First Minister, that we should congratulate this government for not breaking the law, I think they have to do better than that, Presiding Officer. So we have a deficit, as we know, that was far greater when Labour left office at the last time. Now, Labour talk about this £22 billion, the fabled £22 billion black hole, and yet we know from all the independent analysis that's done, 9.4 billion of that total came not from the previous Conservative government, from the above-inflation pay deals agreed by Labour since they came to power. And of course, it's no wonder Labour are confused about their sums, as the Cabinet Secretary reminded us. The new Scottish Secretary is in total confusion over the amount of money available to him. The fabled £150 million, supposedly, that his Scotland office was going to get. He accused journalists of making up that figure, and then it turns out he misspoke. He misspoke. That was indeed his figure. But not surprising, this is the man, after all, whose first major intervention in his new office was to diss Larry the cat. The nation's favourite feline, the favourite pussycat of the nation. And what does Ian Murray describe it as, Deputy Presiding Officer? I could not use that language in a parliamentary session. This is the mark of the man. You would never have got Alistair Jack saying these things about Larry the cat. This is what Ian Murray is saying, Presiding Officer. And yet, what do we see now from Labour? This shameful attack on pensioners, with the removal of the winter fuel allowance. Nearly 900,000 pensioners in Scotland affected by that. No wonder their ratings are plummeting, Presiding Officer, although, of course, it is correct to say the SNP could do something about that if indeed they wanted. So now we look at the choices in the Labour budget. Now, the Labour Party have said they won't increase VAT, they won't increase income tax, they won't increase national insurance. What taxes are we going to see increased? Are we going to see fuel duty increased, hitting those who have to rely upon their cars to travel around? Are we going to see capital gains tax increased, Presiding Officer? When Jeremy Hunt reduced the top rate of capital gains tax from 26% to 24% in the spring budget, at that point the estimates were that would actually increase revenue because it would stimulate activity. An increase in the capital gains tax will hit entrepreneurs, hit those who are wanting to invest in businesses and sell them on. Is that going to help stimulate economic growth? Or will it be inheritance tax that is increased, hitting those who've built up savings over their lives and wanting to pass them on to their families? Or will it be the energy profits levy being extended still further? The energy profits levy risking, according to energy experts, over 200,000 jobs, a reckless attack on the oil and gas sector that is so important to the economy of Scotland and the North East in particular. Of course.
Daniel Johnson.
Described the energy profits levy as a reckless attack. Would he remind the Chamber which party of government introduced that reckless attack? Which party introduced the energy profits levy?
Murdo Fraser.
Sir, we are not proposing to take away the allowances in the way that the Labour Party are currently doing. We're not proposing to turn off the tap on North Sea oil and gas that the Labour Party is threatening to do. If you ask businesses in Aberdeen and the North East, Presiding Officer, which party they think can be trusted on oil and gas, it's certainly not the Labour Party, as we'll hear more from my colleague Douglas Lumsden shortly. But let's look, having spoken about the Labour Party for too long, let's look at some of the choices the SNP have to make, because the budget challenges facing the SNP at the moment are a result of their own choices. That's not my analysis. It's analysis of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. It's the analysis of the Scottish Fiscal Commission, who've said it's the Scottish Government's own decisions which are to blame for much of the pressure facing the country's finances. Yes, I have time.
Briefly, Cabinet Secretary Shirley Ann.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the member for taking the intervention. I wonder how he might react then to the Sage 2 amendments in the Social Security Bill from his Conservative colleagues, which were adding to the Social Security. You cannot come to the Chamber, Presiding Officer, as an opposition spokesperson, demanding that we cut that funding and at the same time in a committee actually increase that funding at the same time.
Murdo Fraser.
What the Cabinet Secretary should be doing is listening to the Scottish Fiscal Commission, what they said about the need for growth. Growth would deliver, if we only matched UK economic growth in the current year, it would deliver £624 million extra in tax revenues in the current year. The way we get more money to spend is to deliver growth, and that's a lesson this government needs to learn. And of course, what they never tell us, Presiding Officer, is the Barnett formula gives us, according to their own figures, the GERS figures, the Barnett formula gives us £2,400 per head of population more to spend in Scotland than the UK average. That's a result of us being in the United Kingdom. The very United Kingdom they want to take us out of, and we benefit by that additional sum that they have to spend as they choose. Of course, we know the choices the SNP have made. We know about the fact they've increased income taxes in Scotland. According to the recent survey by the Fraser Institute, more than 1 in 3 businesses are reporting that this has had a fair amount to a lot of impact on their ability to recruit. And we hear this all the time from businesses across Scotland, businesses in construction, in manufacturing, in hospitality, in financial services. The tax gap between Scotland and the rest of the UK is now actively deterring their ability to... Well, I've taken lots of interventions.
The member is bringing his remarks to a close.
Is now actively deterring them from attracting talent to come and work in Scotland. I know the Deputy First Minister gets that. I'm not sure the Finance Secretary does, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I think I'm probably running out of time. So let me just say in closing here, Presiding Officer, what both governments should be doing. Both governments should be going for growth, lowering taxes, not raising taxes, passing on the rates relief that has been given by the UK Government onto retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. Supporting North Sea oil and gas and not seeking to close it down, as Labour are trying to do, bringing in a national workforce plan for skills and investing in infrastructure in roads like the A9, A96, A75, A77 and the A1. Presiding Officer, we need to have a positive vision for Scotland. Instead, it's going backwards under the SNP, and under Labour, the UK is heading in the same direction. We are being failed by two governments, and we need to do better. I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you, Mr.